Hi everyone, welcome to Clutch Entertainment today, and today I have Mike Stenger with me today.
Hi everybody.
He's a lawyer at what kind of firm is it?
It's a general practice firm. Klar, Izsak, and Stenger is the name. We're in Olivet, Missouri, for whomever in the world is watching this.
Gotcha. So how many people are at your firm?
We have 6 attorneys, 3 partners, 3 associates, and currently have 3 support staff members, and we'll be hiring someone else on board here soon. So,
Okay, how many years have you been doing it so far?
how many years have I been a lawyer? Well, I passed the bar in 2017, so going on 6. I've worked at the firm I'm at now for about 5 years.
Nice. So you got a little bit of experience under your belt.
A little bit, yeah, but I'm always learning. And I tell people, I think the first few years you're out of law school and practicing is kind of akin to a residency for a doctor, because law school doesn't really teach you how to practice law. It teaches you the background law that you need to know to at least kind of get started, but it certainly doesn't teach, and it teaches you how to pass the bar. Law school is really about learning how to pass the bar, but it certainly doesn't teach you how to practice.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about like a little bit on the process of how to be a lawyer and how to get to the lawyer. We're going to talk about some of the types of law, some of the cases that are being handled, and some of the different ways the courts handle cases. And then we're going to have some questions at the end. So we'll start out. What's the process of becoming a lawyer?
Sure. Well, in the United States, which I have to preface because there's a lot of jurisdictions, I think, frankly, most of the world, you get your law degree just like when you get your bachelor's degree. It's not a separate program. But in the United States, typically you need a bachelor's degree, and you apply to a law school. I would recommend an ABA accredited law school. There are ways you can become a lawyer and ultimately take and pass the bar without going to an ABA accredited law school. And I don't want to speak too much about it because I don't know all the details, and I think it varies in different states and different jurisdictions. But generally speaking, the easiest way would be to go to an ABA accredited law school. It's the American Bar Association. It's generally a 3-year program if you do it full time. Sometime, like SLU has a very good 4-year part-time program. I went to SLU, got my Juris Doctorate there in the 3-year program.
So that's in addition to the bachelor's?
In addition to your bachelor's degree, yes. And then after you graduate law school, you have a great graduation ceremony. Everyone throws their caps. They're all happy. And then you get together just in the next week and go back to school basically to study the bar for a couple months. And then you take the bar exam, and that's it. After you pass the bar exam, you have to get sworn in, and you're a lawyer. There are some states that you don't have to go to law school, and they have various other ways that you can eventually pass the bar. Like I know California is one of them, for instance. You can take a minimum amount of classes in education and then apprentice basically with a lawyer. I don't want to get too much in the details because I don't know them, but there are other ways. And there's ways that you can even avoid taking the bar, and I think like very limited amount of states, maybe just one. Like in Wisconsin, if you graduate law school in Wisconsin, you can, if you graduate from law school in Wisconsin, you can practice in Wisconsin without taking the bar. So that's kind of neat. But generally speaking, 3-year program, take the bar, pass the bar, get sworn in the state you want to practice. And then you can practice in that state, in state court. Federal courts, you typically have to apply separately and get bar admission to the federal courts. Now, you don't have to take a test usually. You just have to apply and then demonstrate that you haven't had any, bar, issues with your licensing in the state you're barred in. And then certain states have reciprocity, and you can get barred in those states if your, bar exam was good enough and your ethics exam was good enough. I forgot to mention that on top of passing the bar exam while you're in law school, you also have to pass what's called the MPRE, and that's an ethics exam that proves you know the rules of ethics enough to practice. So you take those tests and get sworn in, and then you're a lawyer.
Do you have to specialize in any type of law?
You don't. So unlike, well, I shouldn't say this because I don't really know all the licensing requirements of being a doctor, but it's much more common, like in medicine, that someone will go and get
like a neuroscience.
I'm trying to remember what they call those now, but you know, a specialty in a field of medicine. In law, I think it's a good idea these days to have a specialty if you can, or and there's certainly some areas of law that have a lot of pitfalls and a lot of very specific little rules that if you don't know can open you up to malpractice. But generally speaking, if you're licensed, you can practice in any state court of the state you're licensed in any area of law.
Is there any law more in demand than any other in particular? Like, is family court more particular than, or like more in demand than like maybe like traffic law or something like that?
You mean in demand, like there's more clients?
More clients towards that.
You know, I really wouldn't know. But I don't think most people would gear their practice based on just how much available business there. If that was your aim, then I think, yeah, traffic tickets probably has to be by volume the biggest thing, right? Because, I mean,
that's probably the most.
A lot of people get traffic tickets, right? But it's interesting. Not every state handles traffic tickets the same way, which might affect the business too. For instance, you know, in Missouri, we have points that you can get on your license. Not every state does that. Mm-hmm. So in Missouri, the way you handle traffic tickets most of the time is you'll, negotiate with the prosecutor and attempt to have them negotiate a plea deal. Letting your client plead guilty to some non-moving violation, so they won't get points on their license, their insurance won't go up. In exchange, they plead guilty, and the city gets money in fines, right? In Illinois, however, the traffic tickets are usually handled by probation. Most people get a probation, as long as they don't get more tickets or more traffic violations, it goes away. So different states handle them differently too. So that's kind of interesting. But obviously, volume isn't always the key, right? To make the same amount of revenue with a business primarily focused on traffic law, you need a great deal more volume than you would need practicing, complex civil litigation or like class action litigation. There's some attorneys like that probably do asbestos defense and some things like that maybe have one client, especially like insurance defense. So like big law defense companies, they may only have a few insurance companies who they regularly work for. Now they'll have multiple cases with that insurance company, right, but that's how they get their business. Whereas, traffic law, you really need to advertise, I would think, and get, if that's how you want to primarily make your money, you're going to need to get a ton of traffic tickets. A lot of clients with traffic tickets coming into you.
Yeah, earn that trust and that.
Well, and you're gonna, and it also, to make it make sense for you, you want to be able to show up at these different municipal court dockets and have a stable of cases to do. Otherwise, you could spend hours sitting in municipal court or a long time to just work out one thing. It'd be easier. It's easier to make money if you have a big volume of cases.
Gotcha. So, what are some of the types of law that you were kind of going into it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you all the ones I can think of, but it would be a non-exhaustive list.
That's fine.
And there's not an official list, right? I mean, it's kind of, there's not like, this is, there's different probably subcategories of law people could come up with, but generally speaking, I think of, there's personal injury, which encompasses a lot of things, but kind of under that ambit, there's also, workers' compensation.
There's a traffic law, obviously.
There's traffic law, which is kind of a subset of criminal law generally. So there's criminal law, which has all kinds of different variations to it. You have, estate planning, and then hand in hand with probate litigation. You have real estate law, business litigation, business formation, so helping people, form businesses in different ways. Tax law, which is kind of, sometimes hand in hand with business formation.
Is there a juvenile law too?
You mean, well, I would think that would be probably in the context of criminal law, or
criminal. Okay.
For like juvenile offenses and things. Yeah, I would think that would be criminal law. I've never worked with juveniles in the criminal law context, and I'm sure it's different in many respects, but it would be a form of criminal law. family law, custody, divorce, that sort of thing. And then there's, highly specialized areas of law that usually deal more kind of with administrative agencies and courts, like disability.
Like law, like with like laws actually, like that kind of law too, like dealing with laws.
You mean like writing law and legislation and stuff? Yeah, I mean, so interpreting and arguing about the meaning of different statutes and different legislation comes up in every area of law, right? Mm-hmm. I've had personal injury cases, and employment law cases, workers' compensation cases, just off the top of my head, where I've had to, cite different statutes and talk about the meaning behind the statutes, try to argue, what the legislators who wrote these various statutes meant when they wrote them. So that comes up even in seemingly mundane things, like even a personal injury or like a slip and fall context. You might have someone who was theoretically trespassing, but just were they trespassing in the ambit of what the statute means when the legislators wrote it, right? And obviously, without getting into specifics, it's hard to really give a concrete example. But yeah, I mean, interpreting statutes is a part of, I think, every area of law. Bankruptcy is probably another special area of law you can practice in. And I'm sure I'm forgetting. Trademark and intellectual property is a big area of law.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. People stealing, plagiarizing, all that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, that's probably crazy. What about some of like the different courts? Is there like a city court, a local court kind of thing, and then there's like a state court? Like how's that work for the lawyers? Like going to those?
Sure. So courts are courts are established in the various constitutions across the United States. Mm-hmm. So at the federal level, we have what we call Article 3 courts, which is the Supreme Court, obviously, and then the federal courts below it. You have the Circuit Court of Appeals and then the district courts. There's, I think, this is embarrassing, I should know it offhand, 13 circuit courts of appeal, and then each one of those, in Missouri, we have 3 federal courts. We have the Eastern District of Missouri, the Southern District of Missouri, and the Western District of Missouri federal court.
So typically, what level does a case start out as? Does it start out as something like a local city court, or does it start out as like a district court? Can it start in each of these areas at certain times based on the case? Or how does that work?
No. Well, so then let me just kind of back up too. Then in state court, we have our state constitution, right? Okay. And the Constitution establishes courts, right, the same way. And at the state court level, you have circuit courts. You have the courts of appeals, the Missouri Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And then circuit courts are further divided. You have associate circuit court, small claims court, probate court, family court, which is still the circuit court. Mm-hmm. And then circuit courts are further divided into municipal courts. So different municipalities can have their own court where they just handle ordinance violations. Generally speaking, most cases originate in circuit court. If the matter in controversy, if you have a matter in controversy under $25,000 but over $5,000, it would be an associate circuit court.
So it's like particulars of some things.
Yeah. A lot of things have to do with the amount of money. So, for instance, to file a case in federal court at the district court level, if it's for diversity. So if you live in Illinois and I'm suing you for a personal injury case and I'm suing you for a personal injury case and I'm a Missouri resident, you try to remove it to federal court for diversity, the matter in controversy has to be over $75,000. And it's funny because in Missouri, to be at the circuit court level for a personal injury case, you have to be over $25,000. Oh. Okay. And so in every petition, every lawsuit we file, we call them petitions in Missouri State Court. Every petition we file, for a case that's over $25,000, in the final paragraph where we have our prayer for relief, we say I'm paraphrasing, but we say in legalese we're asking for an amount in excess of $25,000. And I frequently will send copies of petitions we filed to clients, and they'll say, "What was this that we're only asking for $25,000?" And I have to clarify to them, no, that's just jurisdictional language. That's just saying it's over the minimum to be here, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have small claims court, which is anything under $5,000. People That's meant to generally be handled without lawyers, so people can try to get debts paid and handle things that are probably where it wouldn't make sense with legal fees, And then you also have administrative courts. So like work comp is specifically handled through a special administrative court. That's not an Article III court, as we would say, not a circuit court, right? Or like disability, that's handled through an administrative court. So there's these kind of executive office created court exceptions that are interesting too.
Gotcha. Now we're going to move to some of these questions here. My first question is, does the government ever get involved in any of your cases, where you're trying to work with somebody and then they get involved in the law case and try to influence the prosecutor, not bias, but try to get involved in some way? Does that ever happen?
Well, I don't know what you mean by with the government getting involved. I will say that there are some specific types of law where the government is inherently involved. So as an example, in employment law cases, right? If you want to file an employment discrimination case, so you want to say that an adverse employment action was taken against you, you were fired or didn't get promoted.
So it'd be you against the government?
You against your employer, right?
Oh, okay.
So let's say you get fired from work and you think it's because of a protected class membership, your race, your sex, your religion, your disability, something like that. Technically, the way the law is written, there's a whole administrative process you have to follow prior to filing your lawsuit. So you can't just go and sue your employer. You have to file a complaint with the Missouri Commission on Human Rights, or the MCHR, or the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, the EEOC. And then they have the chance, and this is where I promise I was answering your question, the government has a chance to investigate the complaint first. And potentially before it goes to court, and potentially will take up your cause for you. Now, I've never had a case that they took, but theoretically, they can take up your cause and then sue your employer on your behalf, and the government will step in and do that. So that's an example of the government interfering in litigation, and I don't know if that's the example you were looking for.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
But there are some narrow areas of law that are hinky like that,
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So what about news media? Have you dealt with any kind of news media at all?
I haven't personally. I've worked for partners who had somewhat high-profile cases where they had to respond to the media, and sometimes they'll do it. They'll be proactive. If you have a really interesting case that you want the public to know about, you might draft a press release and send it out and see if it bites. See if it gets any bites. If you have a very interesting case, I've been a part of cases that were, I guess, relevant or interesting enough that news media outlets contacted us, so much so that they interviewed my bosses about it. So I haven't personally ever given an interview or sent a press release in my name. I've helped edit and work on press releases for cases, but that is certainly a tactic sometimes that can help you move your case forward or help you get ahead of a controversy or an issue. There are lawyers who I think build their practice around that, right? So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. What about do you ever have any conflict arguments with a prosecutor and you, as the attorney? Do you ever have conflicts, argue about certain things, about going to court or something like that? Do you ever have arguments like that? Because you have to work with prosecutors.
But that's the job, right? We have an adversarial system, so inherently, your job is to argue against a prosecutor or a defense attorney in the plaintiff's context, somebody, So yeah, but you especially St. Louis, it's a small town, relatively, right? And you do have to work with these people, so you want to always be. It is important to always be professional and courteous.
Does anybody ever get heated, over the top?
Sure.
Basically over the top where it's okay, you're crossing a border there.
Yeah, I'm not going to name any names, but there's attorneys out there that have been very rude or curt or not nice to me or belligerent.
Right?
Yeah. Well, no, I personally, in my opinion, I try to just continue to just be nice as possible, kill them with kindness. And some people maybe don't like that. There's some people that really want bulldog, zealous advocate, angry person, what I would say to
Strap the
people,
gloves,
what I would say to people shopping for a lawyer that thinks that's the lawyer they need, I would tell you most of the time that's not that you don't want that lawyer.
Right.
Because, you know, you want a lawyer who's level-headed and intelligent and frankly savvy and kind, because, you know, at the end of the day, the other lawyer that you're fighting against isn't going to decide the case. A judge is going to decide the case,
right.
or a jury is going to decide the case. And you want someone who a judge and jury will like, right? And rarely is that the person who's just obstinate and just a jerk to the other side. And frankly, I say this to clients all the time when I have to do depositions. For those who don't know, a deposition is where you give your testimony on the record with a court reporter, and the other lawyer basically gets to interrogate you, ask you questions to see what you're going to say at trial. I always tell people the best lawyers in depositions aren't mean, imposing, nasty people who will like berate you into saying what they want you to say, because that never works, right? People get defensive. They're you know, if something's threatening to them, they immediately just cower and kind of say as little as possible and don't give you what you want. The best lawyers in depositions are very friendly people who make depositions feel very conversational and get people to slip up and say things they wouldn't have meant to say.
Right.
So, I tend to think the best lawyers are friendly and courteous and professional. That doesn't mean that you should just give in and capitulate to whatever the other side wants, but there's a big open field where you can still be very nice, professional, and courteous, and at the same time, staunchly advocate for your client.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add today?
No. I am happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah. I don't know that this would have been useful to anyone, but I hope it is.
Oh, I'm sure it
and,
is. There's got to be somebody out there.
I mean, can I make a plug?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Like Phil said, I'm an attorney. My name is Mike Stenger. I work for Klar, Izsak, and Stenger. You can Google me if you have...
I can include in the link in the description, too.
You can Google me if you have legal questions. I can't promise you... give me a call if you have any questions. I can't promise you I can help you with your case.
I'll give them your webpage.
Yeah. I just always, make it... Why not?
Yeah. So. Well, thank you for coming here today, everyone, and appreciate Mike being on the show today. And if you have any other questions or comments, like he said, just go ahead and shoot them our way and shoot him his way if you want to talk to him. So... thanks and have a great rest of your day.